when you're able to find individuals on the other side of the spectrum with that emotional maturity, like you said, and you're able to have discussion, yes, there's going to be a lot of counter opinions. But if you're able to get through those emotions and you're able to have that discussion, that's when you are going to be the best individuals that can find the best conclusions. But unfortunately, a lot of those people can't have conversations because they're just so dogmatically stuck in their ways that it actually turns into a selfish movement rather than the actual movement at hand. And so they act based on emotion rather than logic. And that unfortunately leads to these polarizing issues that just stay as issues and they're never actually solved.
You can be super, super intelligent. You can know a ton of knowledge. You can be right about any certain matter that you're talking about. But if you don't have the emotional maturity required to have that conversation, it's not going to get off the ground, because there's a huge difference between a disagreement and an argument. In a relationship, if it's healthy, you almost never have arguments. Their disagreements, their conversations, of course, they're going to come out, and there might be some polarizing charge to it, but it doesn't get shitty. In a good relationship, it never has to reach that point. Only way that's possible is when you have two people in a relationship who are emotionally mature.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Conscious Cast. Today, it is episode 40. I'm your host, Cal, along with your other boy, Jason Scalora. So today, we're going to be talking about questioning. We're going to be talking about waking up. And without any further ado, we're going to jump right into it. So last night, I was at my friend's house, right? And my friend was like, hey, Cal, can you hold this water pitcher, right? And water these flowers. And I saw these bushes in front of his house. And pretty much I was like, oh, these bushes are very colorful. They're very, very bright. And I was like, oh, why not just water those, And to be fair, it is their house, so maybe I should be listening to them. But yes, pretty much I took the water pitcher, right? And I started to water the bushes because I was like, oh, no, these bushes are fine, And so my friend was like, dude, no, water this flower. This flower is the one they bought, and the bushes were just have been there. And I was like, there's plenty of water in the water to go around. There's plenty of water to go around, right? So pretty much my friend got pretty not crazy amount, but pretty emotional about it, right? And so within me, I was just I got a little bit of within me, when they said that to me, oh, water these flowers, I got a little bit emotional to myself, but I was I took a step back and I was just in that moment in time, I realized how powerful emotions are, right? Because I was like, holy shit, if something this small can generate that big of an emotion, right? Just of course it's a subjective thing, but just taking something like that. And I was I started to think about it and I was like, wow, imagine in a circumstance where, take a debate, for instance, right? You just have such a heated debate with someone and your emotions are flying off the walls. It's just crazy amounts of emotion, right? And you're both situated in these different stances and you don't necessarily want to move towards the truth. You just want to be right, right? And so I realized, I was like, wow, if someone is not able to be aware of their emotions and not necessarily be aware of their own subjective opinions and their own situatedness and wanting to be right, they can be taken out of objectivity and out of rationale and guided by their emotions, right? And of course, it's okay to be emotional, right? Don't deny your emotions, don't deny your feelings, right? Being there's great emotions that we act off of, such as compassion, and stuff like that. But if you're acting based on anger, acting based on jealousy, if you're acting based on just heavy, strong emotions, it can lead to you to be I guess kind of in this spot where you're not moving towards the truth and you're moving towards a fantasy land where you just want to be right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people get themselves into so many absolutely fucking terrible situations where, especially it comes up all the time with intimate relationships, because they get completely embodied by the emotion, right? And they don't separate themselves from the things that they're feeling. And a lot of times that comes from, and this is something I preach over and over again, which is whenever you're especially in intimate relationships, that's when it comes up the most, is if you're in an intimate relationship with somebody. Right, we're not doing this road again. The buzzing of the phone.
We're learning from the past.
Do not disturb.
Do not disturb.
Don't disturb me. I'm on the Conscious Cast.
I'm so much better than you.
Yeah, I'm fucking peasants hitting me up. Like I just have so many like women and just like
God, dude, you're just so cool.
I know. I'm just like super popular. I have a lot of followers on TikTok. I don't know if you guys knew that or not.
Yeah, he's kind of the fucking shit.
Yeah, I mean
No flaws. You're perfect.
Yeah, I mean pretty much. I mean the second I had 200K is pretty much perfection level. Everything after that's like,
Just even more.
it's overflow.
Yeah, exactly.
Got enough to go around.
Enough
All right.
water.
All right. So, what I was getting at was essentially when this happens all the time with intimate relationships, where you'll be feeling absolutely terrible, right? Let's say you have a heated ass argument, and after the argument, God damn,
Sorry, my bad.
the whole place about to go down.
I did not mean to do that. Sorry. Continue.
But the reason why you feel upset after an argument with somebody is because. Here we go again.
Oh, fuck.
Damn it.
All right, heated argument.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. You have to look at me this whole time. You have to.
All right.
Because then otherwise
I'm
if you
good,
look
I'm
away.
good,
When
I'm
you
good,
look
I'm
back,
good. Okay. All
then
right,
I'm
I
going to
got
be
you. I'm good,
fucking.
I'm good. We're good. We're good. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're good.
Okay. So when I talk about relationships with people,
I was like, oh, we're actually doing this. And then I felt it come back up. All right.
fuck.
All right, we're good. We're good.
Why do we keep doing this?
I don't know, man. Fuck. Fuck.
Your editing is going to be terrible.
It's all good.
You're just going to be watching us.
It's actually really fun to edit. I don't gonna lie.
Is it actually?
Yeah. I'll probably cut out some of it. Damn, this is a banging episode right
Yeah,
now.
we're getting deep. I bet these bitches are woke right now listening to this.
Oh, dude, wake up.
Wake up. Just wake the fuck up. Anyways, so when I'm talking about relationships with people, okay?
Yep.
When I'm talking about relationships with people, and
I'm trying so hard, dude.
it's just,
I'm so
I
sorry,
look over
dude.
and you're like, you get like tears coming out of your eyes, but you're like,
Dude, I don't know what it is, man. Oh, fuck.
there's something about, we got to figure out how to
Man,
like
we just got this deep connection, dude.
facts. Because like, you know, when you're in class and you're just sitting
Yeah,
there and
yeah.
like, you can't stop laughing at all. But the reason why you can't stop, because like the second you leave the classroom or you get kicked out, all of a sudden it's not as funny anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I think I got it out.
Yeah.
So,
We're good. I'm good.
okay.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
So when I talk to
God, dude, fuck. All right. Heated debate. You're talking to people.
basically,
Oh my god, dude.
fuck me. It's like
It's
we're never gonna get out of this. All right. When I'm talking to people about their relationships, and when I'm talking to people about their relationships and they're having an argument or whatever, talk to the laugh. Talk to the laughter.
Okay, gotcha.
Keep laughing,
Yeah,
but keep
we're
talking.
Good, we're good.
And they have like an argument or whatever.
Yeah.
And
They have an argument. Yeah. They have an argument. Go, keep talking.
And
Keep
so
talking.
basically, they get to the point where all they're doing is focusing on themselves,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah, focusing on themselves. Fuck that.
son of a bitch.
Oh, dude. Okay, so I think like kind of what you were touching on was like
I didn't even do anything.
I think what you were touching on was like when people get really heated, right? When people get really heated, they're in these separate camps, right?
Yeah.
And they're just in these areas and they're just, it's like tribalism. Like Cole and I touched on this and like, I don't know if it was like one of the first times we ever talked on the Conscious Cast, but like this deep tribalism, right? And so people are just in these groups and they think that like reality is this way.
Fuck, keep going, keep going.
So they think reality is just like in. They think reality is just like in this way, right? They can't see it any other way, and so like while they're just like looking at it, right? And so they like when they see an opposing opinion, it's so hard for them to deviate, right? And so I think it's like for me, right? When you look at like so I'm like nearly vegan. I'm nearly like 100% plant based. Yeah, I know you're a pussy.
Keep going.
Yeah, like so I'm like a nearly 100 plant based, and so like for me, like I see a lot of things as and so like veganism, like why won't get into it here, but when you ask someone like, oh, why do you eat animals? Like, why do you eat meat? You know, it's like it's a very hot topic. Or like when you look at like abortion, race, COVID-19, are you getting the vaccine? You know, like all these different types of hot issues, right? It's very hard for people to not act based off emotions because it's so easy, right? Yeah. It's because it's such a divisive issue and it's such a polarizing matter that when these things come up, and I remember one time, like when these things come up, it's so hard to discuss the conversation and move towards a conclusion.
And it makes it a lot harder when the emotion's a lot higher, right? Because the higher the emotion is, like the bigger the fire is. So you get engulfed a lot easier when there's a lot more emotion, whether it's positive, negative, or it doesn't matter. But you can get engulfed through that emotion.
Yep.
But the thing I was trying to get at was like when it comes to relationships, right? And you're having an argument with somebody, and you walk away from the argument pissed off. You're in a terrible mood. You know, they said some fucked up things to you. You said some fucked up things to them. Like, that's just what happens. When that happens, the only reason why you're feeling upset is because throughout that argument, the only thing that you were focusing on was yourself. That's it. Because if you were to focus on the other person when you're having this debate, when you're having this argument, you wouldn't be nearly as upset. Because you are going into this conversation thinking, you did this to me, this happened to me, I need this, I want this. None of it is, how can I serve you? None of it. But when you have relationships, and I've been on both sides of the spectrum. When I've been in a relationship with somebody where every time we have a debate, it's me versus me. On the flip side, when I had a relationship, which was, if we had a debate, it was, how can I serve you? How can I serve you? Regardless of who was at fault, regardless of how much we contribute to the problem, didn't matter. That's how the problem gets solved. And not for nothing, the emotion is completely separate from where you are. And when you debate with logic, right? And that like with my ex-girlfriend, like that was it was the first time in any of my relationships that I've been in where we never had an argument. Ever. Not even once. And the reason was because she had emotional maturity. That was it. AKA, she was able to separate herself from the emotion she was feeling when she was feeling them. Because when I were to fuck up, when I were to slip up, when I were to say something I shouldn't have said, done something I shouldn't have done, or whatever, she didn't take it as, oh, Jason hates me, or, oh, me. It was, let me separate myself from this emotion. If I need to take 5, I'll take 5. If I need to take a day, I'll take a day. But then we're going to come back and talk about the issue at hand. But it comes from separating yourself from the emotion. And then when you come back and argue or have the talk, it's not an argument. It's not a heated conversation where you're engulfed by the flame of jealousy or anger or hatred or whatever. Because now you're coming from a place of, how can I serve you? How can we make this problem better? It's you and I versus the problem. But that all comes from separating yourself from the emotion. But when you're completely engulfed in that emotion, it's impossible to do that.
Yeah, and I think when you said like you're focused on me rather than focusing on how you can serve others, I think when people focus on themselves, they're focusing on just being right? And so when they're focusing on, I guess, how can I serve others, it's more of like an objective truth stance that they take together, right? Because it's like, if I think veganism is the answer, right? No ifs, ands, or buts. Like, I have those conclusions about just everything, right? No matter what someone says to me, right?
It's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter, right? Because I'm not even going to hear them out. And so if it's on issues like, and I've always found this like fascinating because I'm just on both sides of the spectrum, whether it be carnivore or vegan, right? I've never seen someone actually say something good about like eating meat, for instance, like maybe a health matter, right? From a vegan side, or something on like the carnivore side where it's like, I mean, I'm sure they've said something, but like in my experience, like usually they don't. They're just like, oh, like, or the carnivore says like, pretty much like, eating a whole food plant-based diet is like super processed and unhealthy. You're going to be athletic, have a skinny neck, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so pretty much it's just like when you're able to find individuals on the other side of the spectrum with that emotional maturity, like you said, right? And you're able to have discussion. Yes, there's going to be a lot of counter opinions, right? But if you're able to get through those emotions and you're able to have that discussion, that's when, because you guys are like, let's just say you're both like, you're so highly educated in these areas, you are going to be the best individuals that can find the best conclusions. But unfortunately, a lot of those people can't have conversations because they're just so dogmatically stuck in their ways that it actually turns into a selfish movement rather than the actual movement at hand. And so they act based on emotion rather than logic. And that unfortunately leads to these polarizing issues that just stay as issues and they're never actually solved.
Yeah. And I mean, because you can be super, super intelligent. You can know a ton of knowledge. You can be right about any certain matter that you're talking about. But if you don't have the emotional maturity required to have that conversation, it's not going to get off the ground. Because there's a huge difference between a disagreement and an argument, which is why I was touching on that earlier. In a relationship, if it's healthy, you almost never have arguments. Their disagreements, their conversations, of course, they're going to come out, right? And there might be some polarizing charge to it, but and maybe it's a different way of just defining argument. For me, essentially what it means is it doesn't get shitty.
It doesn't get heated.
In a good relationship, it never has to reach that point. Even if you have a super, super strong point and they have a super, super strong point and they're the exact opposite.
It doesn't get personal, right? It doesn't start evolving into character attacks. And it stays on the topic at hand.
Exactly. And the only way that's possible is when you have two people in a relationship who are emotionally mature. That doesn't mean you're over the age of 30 or 40 or 50. That's not what that means. Because I know tons. Most people who are over the age of 40, who I know, are emotionally immature. Very emotionally immature. Which is why it's very hard to talk to people about this, is because the relationships that you're going to find where they never actually argue, and any time that a disagreement comes up, it's a conversation, meaning there's a relationship with two people who are emotionally mature, those relationships are so far and few. So far and few, right? In the same sense of it's very, very hard to find a relationship where they're not going to think it's whack that you're still friendly with your ex-girlfriend or your ex-boyfriend, that you're still friends and that you're civil and that you still have them added on Snapchat or whatever. You don't block her? That makes no sense. You should block her right away. You unfaithful, cheating bastard. Like, it's hard to explain that to somebody who is emotionally immature, right? Because they don't understand the difference between reality and what their ego wants that other person to do. Drink that water.
All right. So I think, being able to separate those emotions, right? Being able to take a step back and
it's the biggest thing.
It really is, because if you can willingly, and I know it's definitely hard for sure. Like if you're in one camp and then you are able, if you're able to take a step back and be like, what is the other side arguing? Because I remember, like recently, like the Roe versus Wade came up again, and I definitely don't have like a wealth of knowledge on it, like a very solid stance, like certain issues. But I remember I was in class, and it was probably like my management class. And it was like, we always do a current events, like how does this relate to business, and like how should a business react and whatever. And so we, like, as you know, we go to a very liberal college. People are very pro-abortion, at least dominantly in this side. And like, I'm not saying which side is right. I'm not saying which side is wrong. But I remember I was just having a conversation with someone, and I was just like, it was like 2 or 3 other girls, and they were all like pro-abortion. And I was just kind of like, just trying to understand like the arguments that we're making. So I was like, okay, I understand your side about like, pro-abortion. But like, what about the other side, And so I was like, I kept asking him, I was like, I'm not necessarily on that side, right? I'm not necessarily saying I'm against abortion, right? But I just wanted to know like what they were arguing, right? Just so I could get a full idea of like the picture and the discussion that's going on. And now this is obviously my own anecdotal example, but now one of those girls was able to sufficiently explained to me, they would be like, oh, they're pro-abortion because of this. Oh, wait, no, they're against abortion because of this, but then they would immediately go back to their side against and say why this is wrong. They couldn't objectively state this is what they're arguing, right? And of course, like, it's very hard because those emotions come up, right? And they just want people to be on their side. They just want to be right. They just want people to hold the same opinion that they want. And so, like, what do you think would happen in a society where everyone like held the same opinion, that there was no difference of, I guess you could say, judgment? Like, do you think that would be a very productive society? Do you think that would
where
be
everybody holds the same opinions?
Yeah, pretty much. Like everyone just, I guess you could say, was under the same body of knowledge, right? They had all the same conclusions, and there really wasn't any like deviations or I guess you could say challenging perspectives that like.
I guess there wouldn't be any problems because everybody would be on board with everything.
Yeah,
but like it's just such a hypothetical that doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Because then there wouldn't be nature, there wouldn't be anything. Because like that requires no uniqueness to anything. You know?
Yeah.
Because the second there's a difference in genetics or nurture or anything, any small difference, eventually that difference will get magnified over time.
Yeah.
And so with those differences comes a difference in thinking, a difference in beliefs, a difference in perspective, a difference in experience. Like,
so do you think it's important to have different perspectives?
it's necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what gives life juice, you know? Because if everybody thought the same thing, that would mean we would all look the same, we'd all be the same, we'd all have the same things. Like, it would, like, there would be nothing to strive for. Like, it's just, it's just such a hypothetical that's just like, to me, I can't even fathom.
No, I mean, I think it's very interesting too, because you look at the media, you look at like who's in control of the current paradigm, right? They're pushing for, like, there's like this current, like, the way the government operates, the way the media is together, they all kind of just push this one narrative, right? And like they have these same sets of agendas, whether it be around abortion, whether it be around race, whether it be around all these different types of things. And I'm not saying which one is right, which one is wrong, but I'm just saying that's what they're trying to move towards, right? They're trying to move towards, like you said before, they want everyone to think the way they're thinking, because when people think the same way that they're thinking, they're able to easily advance their agendas. Like, for instance, in class, like I was, we talk about like fall semester, and I remember my professor was talking about it. He was like, yeah, I mean, it's easy to talk about the, like, environmental type of issues like global warming and COVID-19 because you guys all have the same type of opinion. It's a consensus opinion. Therefore, I don't really need to discuss that with you guys and debate with you because we've already established that as a common opinion, right? So that's what they're trying to move towards. And very much so, it's like the management of information, right? Like the information that they're putting out may not be necessarily truthful, like always, but for the most part it is. But they craft a certain narrative that benefits them, right? And anyone that kind of deviates from that opinion is kind of censored. And whether this be on social media with the algorithms, right, it kind of blocks out those outside perspectives. So it's kind of like just like in democracy, right? Like we supposedly live in a democracy where everyone's opinion matters, right? And you can openly voice your own opinions. But on social media, that's not necessarily the case, you know, like where you can really. And maybe this, like, whether Elon Musk is really going to come through with his promise where he, like, says, like, oh, free speech, whatever, you know, and people can offer their own opinions. I think it really is vital because for people to open up and say these different perspectives, and I think when money gets intertwined with this, it definitely upholds one narrative because whoever has more money is going to have control over more information and more power over like what people are thinking. Yeah. And so with that, I think if people are able to really think for themselves, right, whether you agree, I know that was kind of a long tangent, but like, I know whether you agree with the dominant narrative, like that's totally fine, right? But as long as you think through it yourself and you come to those conclusions on your own, and you know you've gone through the evidence, you're not just believing in something just because everyone else is believing in it. You're believing in it because you've actually done the work, come to the conclusions, and you are still open for that opinion to change.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to maturity. Yeah. That's all it is. That's all it ever is. Because it doesn't matter. Even if you know absolutely nothing about something, and let's say you have a super strong opinion about one thing, but you have the emotional maturity, it doesn't matter. Because you'll be able to admit that you're wrong because you have emotional maturity. But when you're an emotionally immature idiot, but you have a high IQ, which in this case doesn't really mean anything, all it means is that you can make a stronger argument for a point that's invalid, then you get nowhere because your opinion is When you're talking to people, you're not actually listening. And when you're having debates, you're not actually willing to have the debate, because a debate means that you can be swayed. And all you're doing is this. There's no conversation. There's no middle ground. There's my way or the highway. But it comes from emotionally mature people. And I don't know.
I mean, I think it's very interesting too, because I mean, you look at marketing, for example, right? Like on a nutrition label, they won't say, I mean, obviously they have to list only ingredients and stuff like that's federally, like they have to do that type of stuff, you know? But in terms of the marketing, I'm like, say like a pasta box or whatever, they're only going to say like the good things about it, right? They're only going to select certain characteristics about this, right? And so whether that be like sugar-free syrup, right? It's 0 calories. I mean, which is fucking delicious, by the way. Yeah. I'm more of a calories in, calories out kind of guy. But little did you know that stuff is actually terrible for you.
Oh,
yeah, it's awful for you. But I mean,
I love when they have on the box, they're like, trust me, 0 calories, it's great, trust me. And then you read the label and you don't know half the ingredients, and there's like 50 ingredients. If there's over like 5 to 7 ingredients in anything that you're eating,
definitely,
it's not healthy.
It's not healthy.
I don't care if it has this many calories, this many calories.
Yeah.
Like, keep eating it. See how you look and see how you feel.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I do eat like a lot of I do eat like vegan products. And those are some of them, like vegan chicken, vegan burgers. You know, they're highly processed. You know, but of course, if you are doing it in moderation, you know, you have the right. Like
there's moderation.
Exactly.
You exercise.
Most of your diet is, you know, whole foods. You know, it's okay. It's understandable. And you're eating at a good calorie.
Yeah, but I'm just immediately I was thinking about like Coke Zero. Like, great alternative to water.
Yeah. So
it has 0 calories.
I think that's it is the water, dude.
It's pretty much the same. They both have 0 calories. It's Coke Zero. It's just like flavored water with carbonation and 800 ingredients. Like, I don't understand.
I don't know what you're saying. And I think it's a great analogy too, because if you like look at the water, right? Water is like perfect. It really is, right? I mean, to be fair, like depends on what type of water you're drinking. Let's just say you're drinking purified water, whatever. It's free, right? So you go to a restaurant, it's free. Unfortunately, like, it costs $2.99 at my local gas station.
I fucking hate when I go to like a burger joint, like a local one. They're like, "Oh, we don't have water. You can buy a bottle of water." I'm like, "That's bullshit."
That's bullshit.
It's illegal, actually.
It should be.
It actually is illegal.
Yeah.
You have to serve people water.
Oh, okay. If they ask for it.
Yeah, but like if they're like, "No, we can't. You have to buy it. You don't have to. You don't have to pay to get water at a restaurant."
Really?
I'm pretty sure.
I think. Well,
Let me look it up.
I know if you get.
Keep talking.
Okay. But yeah, you look at like the water versus the Coke, Diet Coke example, or Coke Zero type of example, right? If someone is like mistaking you and like they're trying to sell you like, oh, Diet Coke is better than water, it's 0 calories, tastes better, it's satiating, you know, and like X, Y, and Z.
In the United States, restaurants have no legal obligation to serve free drinking water to customers, as no law requires restaurants to do so.
I wonder if it's like a state law.
However, most restaurants throughout the country do extend the courtesy of complimentary drinking water. No, that's wrong. That's not right. That can't be right. That's the internet's wrong. They're trying to feed you an agenda. I'm never changing my viewpoint. It is against the law.
And I think that's a good segue too, because like, I mean, you look at the Coke Zero versus like the water example, right?
Yeah.
Objectively, water is the most healthy, beneficial. I mean, you are like what, 70% liquid.
Inarguable, yeah.
Yeah, it's inarguable, exactly. But someone through their own beliefs can truly believe that Coke Zero is better for them than water,
So
right?
you think that?
Oh, absolutely, dude. Like,
How do you think they can? What I'm saying is, you think that? I mean, like, truly believe. You think there are people out there that truly believe?
100%. Well, I know people that don't drink water.
No, I know that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But do you really think that they are convinced that what they're doing is healthier than drinking water?
I think it's definitely an extreme, like that type of example, but I definitely think they could partially get stuck in the trap of maybe not fully, but
I just don't think it's possible.
I mean, I definitely think there's like those delusional type of people where they genuinely believe something,
Yeah, but I think, like,
even though
okay,
it's not objectively true.
Psychopaths out of here. I think that like you can lie to yourself enough and just again it goes back to like what you focus on, you're gonna feel.
Yeah.
And if you're drinking the Coke Zero instead of drinking the water, and the only thing you're focusing on is, well, it's 0 calories, then you're gonna feel like a healthy, like in shape person.
Definitely.
But it's like eventually your
What's
brain's,
really going
your brain's
on,
gonna
yeah.
bring you back to, well, we still got 800 pounds right here, so thinking the Coke Zero isn't exactly doing the job.
Yeah, but it's like going back to that, right? So it's like you have all the objective statistics in front of you. What's going on? Of course, like there's maybe scrutiny about like whether those statistics are legitimate. Let's just say like they came from like an ethical, good source, whatever. You got all the statistics in front of you. That's what they are, right? It doesn't matter what you believe, right? This is the conclusion that it's pointing to, right? And at the same time, people will be like, they'll see that conclusion, and they're like, and it doesn't matter what their beliefs say, they'll still choose to not believe it, right? And so it's like, once again, if you're so stuck in your tribal, dogmatic ways of just being like, this is happening because this, for some weird reason, like you look at, I mean, like, I don't even really like the term because most conspiracy theories are turning out to be true nowadays. But yeah, like these, like, really, really hardcore conspiracy theorists, not the common conspiracy theorists that the media throws out. They'll draw, like I was watching maybe this is like, I don't know. It was saying like pretty much like talking about all these, like all the shootings. Like I looked up on TikTok, like woke or whatever, like just for fucking around or whatever. And I looked it up and it was like, it was talking about like the Texas shooting and like before the most recent one. And it was like, and then it was like, oh yeah, like it's funny how the media brings up all these shootings, and then they were like, he brought up like, he was like, well, it's at the same time like the celestial moon is like at this point, so it makes perfect sense. He's like, well, when the moon's at this point and the media's doing this, it's lowering our vibration. I'm like, dude, like, okay, like that is what I'm talking about. It's just like that weird type of voodoo, like type of conclusions that people come to that really don't have any grounding in it. Yeah. So like when you ask someone, how did you come to these conclusions? And they're like, oh, because like the celestial body is halfway through or whatever. That's why the media is, bringing up all these shootings to lower our vibration. It's like, that is a perfect example of how someone can get carried away in dogma, right? And so I think it's very important to really reflect in your own life, because I remember at one time in my own life too, I was like, oh, if I get the COVID-19 vaccine, I'm not going to be able to transcend from the 3D to the 5D, whatever. Yeah. I mean, I'm still unvaccinated, but I developed a more sound viewpoint, and I put away my biases. I put away my prejudices, and I began to objectively see the other side's view. And I decided in my own case, in my own situation, having COVID 2 times and like, my own type of thing, that it wasn't beneficial for me to get the vaccine. Not saying you should, not giving you medical advice, whatever, but like it's moving away from those dogmatic beliefs that aren't really grounded in anything to actual statistics based on your own circumstance that are grounded in things. Right. And so I think it's highly important to not get stuck in like these stories that you tell yourself, and really ground your own opinions in statistics and objectivity.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm gonna say it again. I just like, because like when we're talking about these kinds of things, it's what we're saying is like, don't be completely lost in one side or the other. Be open, right? That's kind of like the underlying message.
Yep.
But the foundation of this idea is emotional maturity. That's all it ever is.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the maturity, like true maturity, I don't give a fuck how old you are. It doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with biological age. If you don't have emotional maturity to change viewpoints, to separate yourself from your emotions, to know when it's time to take a break, to give yourself a couple minutes to regroup and allow yourself to let the emotion die down, or whatever it is that you need to do, you'll never be able to actually have a conversation with somebody where you're going to be able to understand somebody else's point of view.
Yep.
And at that point, it's not a conversation. It's no longer a conversation. It doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's abortion or someone cheated on you in your relationship. It doesn't matter. If you don't have the emotional maturity to have these conversations, you can't, I don't know what the fuck to call it, but it's not a conversation.
Yeah, I think you should really try to understand the other person's view to the best of your abilities, right?
Yeah.
Because how are you going to critique someone in the best way possible if you don't recognize and, I guess you could say, understand their viewpoint to its like full capability,
But
right?
a lot of time people aren't even listening. And
Exactly.
I found this was a problem that I had. I still run into this all the time, is when you're listening to somebody, you're thinking about what you're going to say next.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're not actually listening, right? You're just thinking about whatever you wanted to say, whether you want to sound smart or it's something actually valuable. It doesn't matter. If you're not listening, you're not listening. Yeah. Like, is pretty fucking obvious. And there's this rule that Jordan Peterson, there's a rule that Jordan Peterson talks about, and he says, when you're in a debate with somebody and you're talking about something, let's say it's getting heated, or even if it's just a small debate, you're in a debate, an argument, whatever you want to call it. Okay, let's restart.
Oh, okay.
Rambling a bit. Jordan Peterson has this rule where he says, if you're in a debate with somebody or an argument, implement this rule, and then your argument will get off the ground. If it's going nowhere, if you're not listening to each other, if it's just not going anywhere. Before you're allowed to speak, you have to restate the opinions and thoughts that the other person had just stated to the degree where they agree with what you're saying, right? So if you and I are having an argument, after you state your point, before I can rebuttal or say whatever it is that I want to say, I have to reflect back to you what you just told me, and you have to agree with it.
Exactly.
Right? Because what a lot of people do, and he talks about this as well, he says people will use a straw man tactic, right? So they'll try and so you'll say your argument, and so and then instead of me trying to maybe even help your points to my point, or trying to actually understand what you're saying, what I'll do is I'll say, that's just a stupid argument, make it as weak as possible, mock it, do whatever, so then it's just an easy target to just destroy with my argument, and I'm going to feel good because I won the battle. But did you? Did you really? You didn't, because you didn't actually fight against what you thought you were fighting against. Because a lot of times people make valid points and arguments, and if all you're going to do is just do the straw man tactic and make their argument seem as weak as possible and then completely demolish it because you're so smart. Are you that smart? Are you really? Because if you're actually that smart, what you will do is you'll make your points, and then I'll strengthen your points, because maybe you're not even smart enough to understand certain aspects of your argument that I can piece out of it. Oh, yeah, I see what you said there. Also, what about this? That helps your point as well, which is against my point. This goes into what you're saying too, and that makes sense because of this. However, in that, this is what I found myself doing, because this was super helpful for me, because I was an argumentative dickhead. And I was just so stubborn, and like I wouldn't listen to people. And every time I was listening, I was thinking about what I was going to say next. And when I finally implemented that rule, I found myself listening. And then what I found myself in situations all the time was, I was like, oh shit, like that's actually, no, they're probably right. Like that actually makes a lot more sense than whatever I was going to fucking say. Yeah. Right. And it doesn't feel great because like now you have this feeling of I lost. Yeah. Right. But that's just your ego. And if you actually want to learn shit and get to that point, you have to listen, and you have to be able to get to a point where when you're in a debate, you can acknowledge and fully understand what that person is saying. Because if you can't, you're not actually talking to each other, right? It's like the words that you're saying are going here, and the words I'm saying are going there. Yeah.
It's pointless.
You're both just talking. It's just words with emotions attached to it, but there's no actual grounding in the debate.
And I think, man, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, geez.
It's just because a lot of people get into these debates with whatever it is. You're arguing about.
It's like the smallest things.
It doesn't matter. It can be a small thing, a big thing, whatever. How you define it doesn't matter. Yeah. But if you don't have the maturity to separate yourself from the emotion, if you don't have the maturity to acknowledge what people are actually saying, it doesn't matter what you're arguing about. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't. It doesn't matter how right you think you are, because you're not listening, and it's no longer a conversation. At what point are you gonna start to have the conversation where, oh, maybe actually what they said about this is true. Maybe not what all they're saying is true, but maybe this is true. Yeah. Like, you're gonna really tell me that you're in a debate with somebody and 100% of the things that they're saying are completely untrue and invalid and have absolutely no logic tied behind what they're saying? It's like, at that point, I just don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, how I look at it usually is when I'm looking at arguments from the other side, I'm like, even on my own side, I'm like, I always come back to the notion, I'm sure there's something wrong with my view and others' view. Like, I'm sure there's sometimes it's like, whoop.
After sex, you're just, all right, sorry.
Sex. Yeah, so I always come back to the notion that like my view or someone else's view, there's also like there's probably something wrong with this, and there's also probably a lot of truth in it too. So I'm like, I always like, no matter what type of persuasion they're trying to use, no matter what type of propaganda they're trying to use, or whether they're just presenting it to me in an objective manner, right? I always try and like look at like, okay, what's the counterclaim here? Like, what is the imposing view say?
Have you always just been like that?
No, I've definitely had to develop it for sure.
Right.
Like, no way I've always been like that. Heck no. And we can get into this too. Like, I've always just kind of not really thought for myself. I've always just kind of like, not now, but like, just kind of taken the viewpoint that's most commonly held, you know, like whether that be, on different issues. I'm just be like, and if anyone would kind of bring up a counterpoint, I would be like, what? No, like that's not the way it should be. Like this is the view. And then we started to get into a discussion, and I realized how much I didn't fucking know. Like I was just like, holy shit. Like, and then I would continue on that tangent. I remember one time I was in a Black Ops 2 lobby, and this guy was bringing up. I think I told you about this one time. Was pretty much saying how like the government could control the weather, you know, and like. I don't know if this is fucking true or not, but like, wouldn't surprise me for this, due to the technology we have. But pretty much, we got into a heated debate about like whether the government can control the weather, you know, and we're just like spinning in circles, trick shotting on Black Ops 2. I'm like, the government can't control the weather, you dipshit. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then like. He kept up bringing up all these like points that I just like never even thought of before. To me, it didn't make any sense because it was just so different and I think this is at the same time too with like conspiracy theorists, right? They bring up things that people don't necessarily understand, right? And so when you, like I said before, and when you don't necessarily understand something, you're gonna get frustrated, and most times you're gonna fall back on your own logic and the way you see things, and you're gonna move towards those conclusions. Be like, oh, those people are fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Maybe, and this is a message for myself, maybe I should try to understand the celestial bodies and understand why they're making those conclusions.
But like, if you find yourself in an argument with somebody and you're never pausing after they say anything that they're saying, there's just no way that you fully understood what they're saying. If you don't need a second to like kind of digest what they're saying and then
ask questions,
seek to understand. Mm-hmm. You're never gonna get anywhere because like all you're doing is thinking about what you're gonna say. Like if they have to write. The second that they finish saying whatever it is that they're saying, you're immediately going after them with whatever the hell you want to say. You're not actually processing what they're saying. You're not trying to understand what they're saying. And at that point, you're not talking to each other. You're talking past each other. You're probably not even talking about the same things. And a lot of times, you probably find yourself to be the type of person where you get into an argument, and eventually the argument boils down to things of you're not even arguing about the same things anymore. That's where I found myself all the time.
I mean... Yeah, it's like you start off on one topic. And I think the Jordan Peterson example where you like, you know, you say back like those exact things can help recenter the argument or the conversation around what you're talking about.
So
you know,
helpful, man.
Because a lot of times, like even like in our conversation last night, like we had a deep discussion about race and stuff like that. That we won't get into here because I'm sure there would be a lot of oppositional opinion, and we are not experts. So
this is
not the place to do it for sure. Not the place. But yeah, like we were getting into a lot of it. And I remember sometimes, like, I would just be going on tangents, and I remember, like, midway through the conversation, I was like, what question did you ask me again?
I
was like, what? Like, and I was just like, and, like, that's the same thing, too. You can get so carried away in these tangents, and, like, and another big part of it, too, is, like, being able to recenter the argument.
Right, and I think...
or conversations.
Right, yeah, but that's what I was just about to touch on, is, like, before you enter the conversation and during the conversation, you need to remind yourself of what your outcome is.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
That's a good point.
Because most of the time, your outcome isn't to prove that you're right. Your outcome is to make things better. Your outcome is to come to an understanding. Your outcome isn't to leave the fucking conversation being pissed off at each other.
That's my goal.
Remind yourself of that, right? If you're arguing with your partner, for example, and like, they were supposed to take out the trash, but they didn't, or whatever the fuck you're arguing about. And however the conversation's going and it starts to get shitty, remind yourself of your outcome. You're still living with this other person. You don't want to be walking past each other in the hallway, giving each other the cold shoulder.
Yeah.
That's not your outcome. But if you can remind yourself of that while you're in the conversation, things will go way more smoothly, because you're going to be, it realigns you with the way you're going to communicate. Because when you're communicating to somebody with me, and then you get frustrated, so then it's fuck you, and you're going to say shit that you don't mean and act in a way that's terrible. Like, you won't do that nearly as much when you realign yourself with what your actual goal is. Unless your goal is to say, fuck you, I hate you, and I want you to feel terrible tonight, then to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, whatever.
But if you align yourself with your outcome and you go into the conversation with that outcome at the forefront of your brain, then the debate's going to come second. Being right is going to come second to being in love.
Yeah.
Being right is going to come second to having a good relationship.
Facts.
Being right is going to come second to making that person feel shitty.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
And the way you communicate will fall into place based on the fact that this is your set outcome.
So important.
Do you know what I'm saying?
So important. You got to change the priority. You got to change the goals of that conversation.
It's super helpful to it's just the power of reminding, right? And like when they're like, let's say it's starting to get heated, and like let's say we're both going back and forth, we're both our emotion is getting elevated, it's getting more agitated, like we're getting heated, and then as you're talking, I feel myself, I feel that tension. I'm like, I'm about to fucking, stick it to him, whatever.
Yeah.
Remember your outcome. Remember your outcome. Remember your outcome, because you're gonna remember. Oh, Cal's my fucking boy. Right?
Yeah.
I don't care that we disagree. I want to leave this conversation being friends. I want to leave this conversation him knowing that I'm here for him, that he can tell me anything he wants, that I fucking love this motherfucker, right? I don't
too, bro.
so sentimental now. But for real, like whatever the conversation is, I want to leave that conversation with that outcome in mind. Yeah. And when you realign with that and you remember it during the conversation, it'll calm you down.
Yeah, absolutely. And an extension of that, too, is like, let's just say you don't necessarily remember that goal, but then after the conversation or after the argument, like where you're like super polarized, just remember, like, I think this is once again like it's not an easy thing to do. But if you can remember, like you said, like this guy is my fucking boy. He's always been there for me. Like I want to continue to be friends with this person. I want to continue to like have a relationship with this individual. Yes, you have to get over that hurdle of like, okay, and if you need to spend time apart from each other, absolutely, that's okay. And I think it's important to note that you might not always be able, like, agree to disagree, you know what I mean? Like sometimes, and if emotions do get in it, you mentioned it before, take a day or two, you're going to have to come back to it sometime, take a day or two, come back to it. But just remember being willing to move past that, right? Move through the obstacle that you're in. Be like, okay, yeah, we have our different views. How can we live with this? How can we spend time together without this becoming our dominant state of conversation? Right. And I think being willing to take that first step, maybe it'd be sending a text message, maybe it just be mentioning it, just be like, oh, hey man, I know we got into a heated debate yesterday. I really I'm sorry if I personally offended you. That's not what my goal was. My emotions kind of took over me.
Emotional maturity.
Yeah, emotional maturity. That is emotional maturity in itself. And I think most times, more often than not, depending on who you're talking to, they'll be, because I know most humans in those type of situations, like when you're truly empathetic and you're truly, and you're you really feel their intention.
Yeah.
I think most times, more often than not, not always, but your friend will most likely be willing to be friends with you.
Follow the lead, right?
Yeah. I think that's a great place to wrap this bad boy up.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty, so ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode 40 of the Conscious Cast in the Mother Truckin' Books.
We've been all over the place today, but it was lovely. It kind of flowed.
It started off really, really funny, and then we got into a great flow.
We did.
Honestly, no, I took so much value from this podcast. Anything
100%.
else you wanted to say, my man?
Love yourself, because I love you.
Stay handsome. Make sure you go check out the Jason Scalora show. Follow my man Jason Scalora, JASONSCOLARA. And
you flopped it.
Fuck.
You flipped an A.
Whatever. Jason Scalora on TikTok.
I'm
and
super
on
famous.
YouTube,
You can find me. You know where I'm at.
He's perfect. He's super happy. He's always happy.
That's what makes me happy. I attach my sense of self-worth to my TikTok page.
Gets tons of bitches. So we're good. All right. Make sure you guys stay handsome. Love yourself because I love you. And we are clocking out, people. Peace.
Peace.